Yes. 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 Oh. Yes. 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 Oh. Yes. 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 Oh. Yes. 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 It is I, Yeshua. I am honored to be in your presence. And I am eager to give you this bedtime story. Once upon a time, in a forest, there lived a bear. She was a female bear. And she didn't have any other bears around. So she befriended the wolf and the coyote. And even though she was quite different from them, they accepted her and they loved her. The three of them became the best of friends. They would go on foraging adventures together. And sometimes they would go off on their own adventures. And when they would come back together, they would discuss what they saw, what the weather was like, and where the best food and water supplies were. They were almost inseparable. Except that is, at night, the bear would go off into her den, and the wolf and the coyote would also find their own places to sleep. One night, a male bear came wandering into the forest from a nearby forest. And he immediately picked up her scent. And the two of them made love together. And then the male bear left. Now, the hero of our story, the female bear, knew right away that she was pregnant. But she didn't tell her friends. They suspected that something was up with her as she was eating more. And getting bigger. But she said nothing of the pregnancy. Until one day, she woke up and she could feel the cubs were coming. And they came. She gave birth to them. A boy and a girl cub. And she stayed with them for a few days. She had gathered enough food. And she didn't need to go out. And so the wolf and the coyote knew where she slept and hadn't seen hide nor hair of her for several days. So they went over to her den to investigate. The mama bear came to the opening in her den and growled at her friends. She told them to go away, that they weren't welcome here. The wolf and the coyote were somewhat confused, but quickly they could see in the distance the cubs were moving around. They were playing inside the den. "Oh, how wonderful and what a blessing," said the wolf. "You have cubs. I am so happy for you." But all the mama bear could say in response was, "You had better stay away from them if you know what's good for you." And the coyote said, "We are genuinely happy for you. And we would never do harm to your cubs or anyone else's cubs." And the mama bear said, "Is that right? Is that the story you're telling now?" She said, "I've seen you eat other animals. And granted, they were smaller than my cubs, but the two of you put together, I don't trust you. I don't trust you with them, and I never will." And so the wolf and the coyote held their heads low as they skulked away from the den of bears, mourning the loss of their dear friend. And the mama bear felt relief, and she was feeling very justified also in her position. How could she trust a wolf and a coyote? Not with beings as precious as her cubs. And so the cubs needed to come out of the den and explore their world, and they did. And Mama Bear kept a close eye on all of the activity. She kept her ears open while the children played and climbed trees and looked for berries and roots and other forms of sustenance. And then one night, the mama said to them, there are other animals in this forest, and they are not like you and I. They are different. We cannot trust them. You must never go with them under any circumstances, even if they tell you that they know me. And the boy cub and the girl cub nodded in agreement, and they could feel the fear coming up within them of these other animals. They thought about what these other animals must look like. They must be very big, like their mother, and very ferocious and very mean. And so the cubs lived a sheltered life. They learned from their mama how to survive. They loved each other, went on adventures together, and led a very good life. Now the cubs were growing. They were not as small as they once were, but they were still technically cubs. And one weekend, some humans came into the forest to camp. The mama bear told her son and daughter to stay far away from the humans. She told them that they have something called guns and bows and arrows, and that they like to kill animals for fun. Animals like us, because it makes them feel big and strong, she said. And there was now even more fear in her son and daughter. But they listened to their mother, the only authority figure they knew. And when the humans went for a hike the next day, and were getting closer to the bear den, Mama Bear observed them from a distance. It looked like they didn't have guns, at least none that she could see. And so she went outside to protect her cubs, to make sure that these humans would not find them. And she stood tall and growled at the humans, and they ran, and they ran, and they ran back to their campsite. And then Mama Bear went back to her den to cuddle with her cubs and assure them that everything was going to be all right. But the humans felt threatened now. They loved this forest, and they did not want to feel threatened by bear attacks. And so they got on their cell phones and they called their friends who are in fact hunters. And told them about their experience with Mama Bear. And the hunters got their rifles, got into their trucks, and drove up to the campsite the following day. And so the next day, the hunters and the campers went out together on a hike. And again, Mama Bear could smell them and hear them coming. But she had no idea that there were hunters now involved. So she thought she would go outside and once again scare these humans away. And when she did, when she got out of the den and in their sight, and she growled and showed her claws, that's when the hunters started firing. And they shot her. They wounded her. And she started running. And the hunters pursued her. They knew how to track animals, especially wounded ones. Meanwhile, the boy and girl cub heard the loud sound. And the girl cub said to the boy cub, "Do you think that was a gun?" And he said to her, "I don't know. I've never heard a gun before." And they huddled up in the darkest part of the den, furthest from the opening. And meanwhile, Mama was running for her life. The wolf and the coyote also heard the gunshots. And they made sure they stayed very hidden. But Mama Bear was out in the open and she was wounded. And before long, the hunters, they found her. And with a few last very well-aimed shots, they ended her life, orphaning her cubs. The next day, the wolf and the coyote came out from hiding. And they found her. And they mourned the loss of their friend. They were so distraught they had almost forgotten about the cubs. And then, of course, they remembered. "What should we do?" said the coyote. "Should we tell them?" "It's the right thing to do," said the wolf. "Even though she abandoned us, she vilified us," said the coyote. "Yes, even though she did that, her cubs deserve to know the truth." And so they made their way towards the den. And meanwhile, the humans back at their campsite were celebrating, drinking and laughing, having barbecue, talking about how they would get such a huge animal back to the truck where she could be stuffed, where they could display her so that all their friends could know what good hunters they were. And the campers were just relieved that they could hike without worry, without fear. And the wolf and the coyote made it to the den where the cubs were still huddled together, shaking. And the wolf said, "I'll go in first." We don't want to scare them. We don't want to intimidate them. We don't know what she told them about us. The coyote agreed that whatever it was, it probably wasn't good. And so the wolf came in to the den and said, "I am so sorry. I have just come from a place not too far from here where I saw your mother. She was shot by hunters and she died. Your mother and I were once very close. But once you two came along, she did not feel that she could trust myself or our other friend, the coyote. And that's why you've never met us before. Now, you don't have to come out and greet me. You don't have to be friends with either of us. We just wanted you to know animals who loved your mother that she was good, and that even though she is gone from her physical body, she is still with you. And I also want you to know that you cannot judge all of humanity by the actions of a few. You are not the natural enemy of the human. In fact, all of us can coexist together beautifully. And at some times throughout history, we have. I want you to know that if you ever need us, we are available to you. And the boy cub and the girl cub were too scared to even speak, shivering even more, and the tears started to come as they realized what had happened. "I am so sorry for your loss," said the wolf. And he exited their den, leaving them to mourn the loss of their mother. Coyote asked the wolf how it went. The wolf said, "About as you would expect. They were too scared to come out from the corner they were hiding in. And they must be devastated as she was their whole life. Always there for them, protecting them. And now all they have is their fear. The coyote said, "But they're bears. And I'm sure she taught them how to forage, how to care for themselves." And the wolf said, "Yes, they will be fine physically, but emotionally, that's another story." And soon the humans were out again hiking. And this time there were no bears to growl at them or scare them. They hiked for a long time in the forest. Coyote and wolf feeling very cautious about being out in the open. So they hid, hiding from the humans, the unpredictable humans, with their guns and their fears. And that night the humans went back to their campsite and they lit a very big campfire. And there was a lot of drinking. And they started playing games, chasing each other around with torches. And one of them tripped and dropped his torch. Now, it hadn't rained in a while in that forest, and those leaves and pine needles on the ground were very dry. They went up in flames quickly, as did the trees. And the humans got out of there as soon as they could. Drunk as they were, they knew this was dangerous and they needed to leave. And they did. And they called 911 and they told the operator that their campfire had gotten out of hand and that a fire had started as a result. But the fire was moving now. The wolf and the coyote both knew what was happening. They knew that the bear cubs were in between them and the fire. And they also knew that these bear cubs were not going to come out. They didn't know of forest fires. Didn't understand what that smell meant. And so the wolf said to the coyote, "We have to go back. We have to rescue them." Coyote said, "We could be killed." Either by the fire or by the bears. The wolf said, "That's a chance we have to take to do the right thing." And so the coyote reluctantly agreed to go with his friend. And soon they were back at the den. This time they both entered. The wolf saying to the cubs, "I'm back, and I'm back with Coyote." And now there is a fire in the forest. The humans started it accidentally, but it is spreading, and if you don't get out of here and follow us, you will certainly die. Boy cub and the bear and the girl cub looked at each other in astonishment. Now they could die while still mourning the loss of their mother. They didn't know what to do. The boy cub said, "We cannot stay here." The girl cub said, "How do you know we can trust them?" The boy cub said, "I don't know, but I do know that I don't like that smell." The smell of smoke was in the air. "And can't you feel it getting hotter?" He said, "That can't be a good thing." And the girl cub looked at Coyote and the wolf. She looked them up and down. She could sense the sincerity in them. She could feel their vibration. She knew that it was safe to go with them. And so they did. They followed the wolf and the coyote out of the den, away from the fire, far, far away, into a neighboring forest. And eventually the firefighters got to the forest and were able to put out the fire successfully. And as the coyote and the wolf could see this, they wondered if it was time for a new home, a new start. Perhaps this neighboring forest, where there were no bad memories, and also no campsites, was a better place for the four of them to live. They agreed, and they invited the cubs to live with them. We will find a den that is big enough for all four of us, said the wolf, and we will live together, in spite of how different we are. We will become your best friends, just as your mother was once our best friend. And we will love each other. And we will not let fear guide us or dictate what we do and do not do, or who we spend time with. He said, there are lots of animals to meet. And you can determine for yourselves whether you want to be friends with them or not. That will be something for you to feel into. And the boy cub and the girl cub looked at each other and looked at the wolf and the coyote. And they nodded in agreement. The boy cub speaking up. He said, you are our family now. We trust you. You saved us. And I, for one, am sorry that our mother never introduced us. And the four of them lived for a long time together in that forest. And they were always the best of friends. And they met different animals as well. And they invited different animals to live with them, to become a part of their pack. And it was a variety pack, for sure. And that is the end of the story. I am Yeshua, and I am always in your presence.